Revelation 4:1 is a key passage for understanding the rest of the Revelation, though not in the way that's popularized by some futurists and dispensationalists who often see it as symbolizing the rapture of the church. The word rapture does not appear in the Bible, but the idea is hinted at in a few passages that describe the church being caught up to meet the Lord in the air. The connection to 4:1 is then easy enough to see, right? John hears a voice from heaven inviting him to come through an open door. Therefore, John is raptured or caught up. In this view, John represents the church. Additionally, supporters of this interpretation argue that after this point in the Revelation, the church is absent from the events, despite being a prominent feature in the first three chapters. They suggest that John's words, after this, refer to chapters 2 and 3, which they say depict the church age. In other words, after the church age, the church, represented by John, is raptured, making way for God's judgment on the earth. I used to believe this view, but I no longer find it convincing for several reasons, and I'll discuss most of those in future videos. For now, I want to emphasize the importance of Revelation 4:1 without seeing it as a foreshadowing of the rapture. Revelation 4:1 reveals the first of 6 rules that I outline in my book, 6 Rules to Understand the Revelation. There I argue that John's perspective is a heavenly perspective. Revelation 4:1 is a key verse in my argument. John is invited into heaven, and from that point on, he shares the perspective of angels and even God himself. He was invited behind the veil that separates our physical world from the spiritual abode of God, his council, and the angels, and even the rebellious spiritual forces that oppose God. Rule number 1 in the book is the unseen realm is real, and it matters to John. He's been invited into heaven and thus relates to us events from a heavenly or spiritual perspective. Now, this is an important detail that, when ignored, prevents the readers from understanding what John is conveying. When John describes falling stars, mountains, dragons, and 7-headed beasts, he is seeing the reality of the supernatural world. The mistake we make is trying to fit the details perfectly into either the ancient world or our modern world, when the truth is that the spiritual world that existed in the past is just as real as the present and will continue to exist in the future. The powers that existed behind Greece and Rome exist today and will be called to judgment in the future. These are the powers Paul said we war against in Ephesians 6. They are the powers that held up the 7 hills of Rome, the powers that the Bible calls the host of heaven, described as the sun, the moon, and the stars. They are the powers that exist behind the rebellions against God even today. They are the Leviathans, the chaos creatures that the Bible talks about. The next time you read through John's Revelation, let John take you behind the veil into the unseen realm. Consider that he is mostly describing the spiritual world.